The sly grin on his pale face shone in the moonlight. The man held out a thumb to the side of the road, a thumb that seemed unnaturally long and pointed. His skin looked as white as a sheet of paper, and his grin spread from ear to ear. His eyes watched me passing, like two dark oil spots shining under the streetlight. I did not pull over. I didn't even talk to the man. But it would happen again. Everything had gone strange. That day, back in 2019, had seemed normal enough. I'd gone to work, doing a night shift at the warehouse. They paid me decent, $24 an hour, so commuting 30 minutes each day didn't bother me. I certainly had no higher-paying warehouse job in my town, a town where huge stretches of forest took over most of the land. At 2:25 a.m., I left work, driving home the same country road I'd used 1,000 times before. It was a straight shot to my town, a winding paved road that passed by countless corn and tobacco fields, the smell of manure permeating the air and wafting in through the vents. I'd burned the air freshener slightly, as always I did, releasing a nice vanilla smell inside the car that sent the reeking odor of old fertilizer away. But by 2:50 a.m., I realized something seemed off. First off, I should have reached my home by now. But the road just kept going forward, totally dark, the field stretching off to the horizon in every direction. Eventually, I realized I was going in a circle. I saw the same massive dead tree on the right, its bare branches reaching up into the cloudless sky. I considered turning around and trying to go back the way I had came, but I knew I had to be on the right road, so I kept going forward, and after a few minutes, I saw the hitchhiker for the first time. His skin looked totally white and bloodless, thin and papery, as it stretched across his strangely inhuman face. His grin seemed to stretch from ear to ear, and I saw his long, twisted thumb extend when I passed. "Like hell I'm picking him up," I said, turning on the radio. But I checked the rearview mirror a few times, my heart seeming to beat too fast in my chest when I saw him staring in my direction, still smiling broadly. His limbs were thin and twisted, too long, the joints bending in ways and areas that human limbs shouldn't normally go. He wore a plain khaki shirt and khaki pants. I didn't realize at the time, but that was the uniform for jails and prisons in the area, at least the low-security inmates who didn't require bright red or orange jumpsuits of potential escapees or those suspected of convicting extreme crimes. Streetlights flickered as I looked back, strobing quickly, casting the silhouette of the man in an eerie light. With every strobe, I saw his face transform, the smile fading into a scowl of pure hatred and insanity. I drove faster, trying to get away. 5 minutes later, I saw him again in front of my car. The road went straight, but somehow he had gotten ahead of me. The lights flickered faster all around the road, and his smile had returned, though looking even more menacing than before. His teeth looked too sharp, and there seemed to be far too many of them in that inhumanly wide mouth. As I drove past him, my heart hammered in my chest, the whole world going dark, and I slammed on the brakes. The lights on my car had just cut out, as well as the street lights, and the ambient light from the stars and the moon were non-existent under the thick black clouds covering the sky to the horizon. I heard light footsteps against the pavement of the road. My engine still ran, but even inside the car, the lights had gone out. The radio turned off and the gauges stopped working. Something felt wrong, not just in a mechanical sense. There was a feeling of dread. As the streetlights and the gauges and the radio all came back on at the same moment, I saw the man in my passenger seat, that eerie grin still spread across his face. The door had never opened or shut as far as I knew. It seemed like he had just teleported into my car from his position near the passenger door. Perhaps that was simply a trick of my mind in the darkness. Perhaps. "Thanks for helping me," he said in a low, mocking tone. "You don't know how many people just drive past and refuse to help their fellow human beings in a time of trouble." "What do you want?" I asked, low, whispering the words. Wished I had a knife or a can of mace or something that would give me the edge. I felt so naked. "I just need a ride to the next exit, friend." There isn't a highway. There are no exits. It's just a random country road. I'm not even sure I know where I am. I don't know how that's possible, seeing as I take this way home every day, but there's an exit when you need them in life, and I need one now. Go forward. When you see the exit to Rusty Township, take it. I'll let you go if you do. I'll let you live. But otherwise..." He turned to me, grinning again, looking at his sly, inhuman face, hearing his words. A fragment of an old poem by Robert Browning I'd first heard in college came to me. My first thought was, he lied in every word, that hoary cripple with malicious eyes, askance to watch the workings of his own lie, on mind and mouth scarce able to find a ford. Suppression of the glee that pursed and scoured its edges at one more victim gained thereby. What else should he be set for with his staff? What, save to waylay with his lies and snare all travelers who might find him posted there, and ask the road? I guessed that skull-like laugh would break what crutch gin write my epitaph for past time in the dusty thoroughfare. Looking into those eyes, I felt that this poem had been written about this exact man. I drove forward, and he reached into his pocket. I tensed, expecting a gun or a knife, but he brought out a little pouch instead. "What's that?" I asked nervously, looking over. To my surprise, an exit sign had showed up a few hundred feet away. The pale man threw the pouch from hand to hand, his twisted, inhumanly long fingers snatching it out of the air, like a toad snatching a fly. "Just a few precious things I like to keep on me. Where we're going, we'll need these. By the way, what's your name? If we're going to be traveling companions, we should introduce ourselves. That is, after all, the basic custom in our worlds." Up ahead, I could make out the sign now. The Rusty Township, 5 miles. Good old Rusty. It's a spectacular place. You'll never see anything like it, I guarantee. By the way, my name's Forrest. I'm quite a big deal where I come from. You'll be happy you stopped to help me. I guarantee that." He laughed, a shrill, gurgling laugh that made my blood run cold. "Isn't that right, Jason?" I nodded. I wasn't surprised in the least that he knew my name. Clearly, he'd been waiting for me, and me alone. I didn't know why, but I had a feeling I'd find out soon. I turned on my blinker as we approached the exit, even though I hadn't seen another car or human being on the road in over an hour. The woods rapidly receded into broken, bombed-out houses and buildings. The darkness around us jumped and danced as headlights illuminated rusting tanks with the tops blown off, burnt cars whose blackened skeletons stood on the sides of the road like sentries, their smashed and shattered safety glass scattered across the roads. "What is this place?" I asked, horrified. "Just keep driving," the man said. At certain points, the road narrowed so much from the wreckage that I had to slow down to a few miles an hour, trying to weave in and out of the cataclysmic damage that had destroyed the city. Off in the distance, I saw the silhouettes of skyscrapers, black against the dark gray clouded sky. No light shone in the buildings. Bodies hung from the dead, listless lampposts as we neared the downtown. Soon the entire main street turned into a pile of wreckage, and my car would go no further. The remains of what looked like a fighter jet shone under the headlights, pieces scattered and twisted and blackened from the flames across every part of the road. The corpse of the plane mixed with the various burnt-out cars and destroyed tanks to create a nearly impregnable barricade, unless one was on foot and could climb over the wreckage. Forrest pointed to a side street, grinning. I swung the car left, and the lights illuminated a horror I had never imagined. The first living being I had seen in this apocalyptic wasteland. I thought it was a little boy at first, but it seemed I was wrong. His skin shone a bright red, like the color of inflammation, and he spider-walked on all fours backward, his head upside down. His hands twisted in front of him as he bent and heaved. I had never seen anything like it, except maybe in the movie The Exorcist, and the speed with which he went forward in that twisted posture sent waves of dread running through my body. His eyes focused on the headlights of the car, and he hissed so loudly that I could hear it through the closed windows. He moved forward, twisting and writhing, his joints seeming to bend in ways that human limbs were not supposed to. His head so hyperextended, it looked like his neck should have snapped. But it was the eyes reflecting the light of the headlights that really disturbed me. They looked to be covered in a bloody film, a thick pink membrane that dribbled strange fluid down his face. Underneath the cataract, I could almost see the vague suggestion of actual eyes, but it was like staring down a well, unable to make out the bottom, except by silhouette or glimpses. Jumping up on all fours, he flew through the air and landed fast on my windshield. I began to scream. "Forrest, do something!" I yelled, but his bloodless, inhuman face seemed nonplussed. I saw, in photographic awareness of a massive adrenaline spike, he still had his little pouch in hand. Sighing, he opened it up, untying the drawstring. I heard little clicking sounds coming from inside. Looking back, I saw the boy's face almost pressed against the windshield, staring directly at me. His eyes were only a foot away through that thin glass, regarding me with abject hatred and hunger. He gnashed his teeth, snapped his jaws open and closed. Then I saw his little red hand lift up, and he started smashing at the windshield. With no apparent pain, his fist collided with the glass in front of my face. A circular dent appeared, the loud thud making me jump so high I nearly hit my head. Cracks spiderwebbed out. He raised his hand again, punching hard, furious, spitting and hissing. Coming back down, I heard the windshield give way when he hit the exact same spot again. As if in slow motion, I saw the web of cracks lengthening and thickening when the safety glass shattered, sending the debris falling over me and Forrest in the inside of the car. Forrest was no longer smiling. His scowl made him look demented. The pouch had opened, and from it he drew a pebble no larger than a pencil eraser. The pebble seemed to radiate color and light, almost like opal, but the light in his stone seemed to come from within it. The rainbows of color shimmered within the stone, constantly swirling and combining. The boy began to reach into the car, and I started shrieking. His fingers looked broken and twisted, and I saw his nails had turned black with crusted blood and dirt shoved beneath them. The smell of his body from so close made me want to gag. The odor felt like a physical presence inside the car. A thick, rotting, cheesy smell that emanated from the boy's strange flesh. Forrest grabbed the hand just as it neared my throat. The bleached hand snatched at it in a blur, moving faster than humanly possible. With a terrifying crack, I heard the bones snap as he twisted the hand backwards until it nearly touched the boy's arm. The bones splintered and snapped through the skin, sending drops of dark crimson blood flying in every direction. After a moment of utter silence, the boy let out a wail that shook the car. It covered my ears as the rest of the glass in my car shattered under the deafening cacophony. "God, shut up!" I tried to scream to Forrest, but I couldn't even hear my own words. If it went on much longer, I felt certain my eardrums would explode. I clamped down tightly around my ears, but at that moment, Forrest pulled the boy by his broken arm towards him and raised the colorful stone to the boy's face. With his other hand, he grabbed the boy's throat and choked, closing off his windpipe. My ears rang in sudden silence. "My boy, my boy," Forrest said in a fatherly tone. "This is the wrong car for you to attack." He squeezed tighter, and the boy's already crimson face went an even darker blue. He tried to claw and bite at Forrest, but the boy rapidly lost strength. As he died, Forrest raised the strange iridescent pebble to the boy's mouth. I saw something go from the boy into the pebble, and I'm not sure what it was. It looked like streaming shadows, totally black and impenetrable. It ran in a current, the black torrent swirling and twisting as the pebble absorbed all of it. The boy seemed to lose substance, his skin sucking in on his body, his flesh evaporating before my eyes. By the end, he looked just as desiccated as everything else, his skeleton dry, papery thin. Forrest threw him outward, the light body arcing through the air and falling on top of a blackened motorcycle, laying on its side in the middle of the street. I looked over and saw with both wonder and horror that the pebble had changed. Its formerly opalescent quality had gone, and now torrents of black and dark crimson swam inside the stone, still twisting and moving constantly, but without the beautiful iridescent light it had shone with earlier. What is this place?" I asked, the only thing I could think of. I didn't expect Forrest to answer me, not truthfully. I knew he would probably kill me as soon as he got whatever it was he was after. But he surprised me, told me a story that I would later confirm to be true. "I told you, this is Rusty Township in the county of Victoriat. It's a rather long story, I'm sorry to say. I don't have time to tell it all to you today. I can give you, what do you call it in your world, the Cliff Notes version." "Okay," I said, uncertainly. He looked back at the pebble, still in his hand, and with a dexterous flip of his fingers he threw it in the air and watched it land perfectly in the little pouch's mouth. He tied the knot and put it back in his pocket, turning to me and grinning. "It's a rather funny story. I mean, at least to me. Few billion dead and the rest refugees in a dying, unrecognizable world." He did laugh at that. "I guess it all started with a man named General Matheson. He took power in Victoriat in a coup from the democratically elected government during a period of hyperinflation and crippling unemployment, when the people rioted and the homeless covered the streets. The citizens of Victoriat supported him, by and large, because the conditions seemed so terrible that they thought it couldn't possibly get any worse. Ironic, in a way, isn't it? So, General Matheson starts fixing the economy by starting wars. A wartime economy requires countless tanks, soldiers, planes, missiles, everything else, which makes new jobs. He bombarded the Kingdom of China, stating that they had taken legitimate islands in South China Sea from Victoriat's allies in the region. Meanwhile, back at home, he also began recruiting men for the running of camps and the rounding up and murdering of undesirables. He began with drug addicts and alcoholics, homeless people, the insane, criminals, and whoever else seemed unfit for his great new country. The men called themselves the Iron Servants. They began to drag people off the streets and take them away, never to be seen again. In reality, the iron servants would put them in a cell or transport bus and give them all the water to drink, water laced with high doses of carfentanil and atropine, which are both tasteless and extremely lethal. Afterwards, they'd just burn the bodies in open-air pits. By this method, they killed tens of millions, and the economy was absolutely roaring. Everyone was happy, everyone had jobs, and all the problems seemed to have disappeared overnight. A true success, wouldn't you say? A happy ending. Well, not exactly, though. Turned out the Kingdom of China had developed a strange new bomb. Not a nuclear one, but one that used antimatter as the explosive material. It had a far stronger yield than any hydrogen bomb, or so they predicted. But antimatter was so expensive and hard to produce that they had no trial run. They took the first bomb and dropped it over Victoria's Center, near the city of Rusty Township, where we are now. The antimatter ignited when it hit the surface and was released from its containment. There was quite an explosion, a massive crater that went deep into the ground. A black mushroom cloud went high into the clouds, and the ground shook, but when the smoke had cleared, it seemed the antimatter hadn't had nearly as much yield as projected. Most of the city still stood. But that crater had strange things within it, as the people soon found out. Very strange things, indeed. They began to crawl and swarm out of the hole as if a tunnel to another world had been opened. And perhaps it had. There's no perhaps about it, I thought to myself, as I put the destroyed car in drive and went forward into the dead city. You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story, or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad and Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributors. Thanks to Saikat, Lee Kendall, Janet, and Chris Kinsella for being our spooky skeleton tier contributors. And, of course, thanks to Xaronan, Winter, Tyler Parker, Stephanie Carrington, Sarah ASMR, Hi Stacy, Emily Coltsfoot, and Cinnamon Fox, and Bella Lee for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. As I said, if you'd like to have your name read out at the end of every episode that I make, and maybe get a little more, come on down to Patreon and sign up, or become a member on YouTube. Ghostly Reader tier contributors get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. So, what are you waiting for? Come on down and give it a look. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.